I'm gonna be honest, this chapter's pretty much just for the ghoul-related survival. Living horses don't need to read this, though you'll probably get an awesome history lesson out of it. Right, everyone on the same page? Great. Let's talk about heroes. The heroes we grow up with are rarely the heroes we keep once we're actually grown up, and this is especially common during the war. It must have been tough to idolize Rainbow Dash when she went from being one of the fastest flyers in Equestria to a soldier in the equestrian army. Ponies change, and heroes change. It's a fact of life that one day, the worst day, you'll realize your heroes aren't perfect, unless you're me and your hero is the Grainne Mhaol, in which case you get a hero who remained a badass for hundreds of years. Through treaties, negotiations, and discreet strong-arming, the Equestrians and Zebraceans were pulling the other species and nations into our war, with most nations folding fairly quickly into a conflict that touched all corners of the world. And the Equestrians attempted to gain a hoofhold in the British Isles, which were known for their naval capabilities. At first, things appeared to be going just right for the Equestrians, with Trottingham agreeing to join their side and allowing Steel Ranger bases to be set up on their land. But the Shetland Isles and Shireland were much less accommodating, refusing to join the war and threatening to take up arms against any mainlanders attempting to bring that war to their home. They began to sink ships belonging to zebras and equestrians that came too close, resulting in a temporary truce being called between the two mortal enemies. The equestrians and zebras invaded the islands in a combined effort to put an end to their meddling, but were unable to achieve victory. This is something you already know about having read my chapter on the Great War Alliances. But what you may not know is that the resistance against the mainlanders was not necessarily sanctioned by the Shetland and Shireland governments, but was instead formed from rogues leaving their navies to fight. Former sailors mutinied against their captains and stole ships, taking control of a town in South Shireland as their base of operations. Now, we're gonna flash back for a moment to before the Great War, to a time where there was peace around the world and conflicts rarely expanded beyond pie wars and duels that were typically conducted with wet fish instead of swords. There was a young filly in Shireland who wanted to go sailing with her merchant father, but he told her that the sea was no place for a mare because long and beautiful meremains would get caught in the, shipping stuff. Okay, I don't know boat terms, sue me. Also, you can't really see it, but I'm scrunching really hard right now because this is, like, super duper intense. Anyway, when the father came down to the docks early the next morning, ready to set sail and deliver his goods to Equestria, there was his daughter, standing on the deck of the ship having shaved off her mane and most of her tail. What else could her father do but let her come with? So began the seafaring life of Grainne Mhaol. She spent 10 years on the seas learning to sail and command a ship, so that by the time she was a grown mare, she knew her trade better than most ponies she began sailing with. However, her time on the ship was cut short as she reached the age of marriage, and because the British Isles aren't as forward-thinking as Equestria, she was expected to give up her life of sailing and take a husband. Which she did, marrying the chieftain of another seafaring clan on a small island off the coast of Shireland. And she lived with her husband for many years, right into the time of the Great War, in fact. Her husband was one of the sailors to gather his ships and join the resistance, beginning his own fight against Equestria. Their island became an important resting point for the Shireland pirates, and although Grainne had put the seafaring life behind her, she was dedicated to the task her husband had set before her. She helped care for the wounded returning from battles at sea, aiding in repairing any damaged ships, and gave food and shelter to those who needed it. But all of that changed when the Equestrian army discovered the location of their island and learnt from Mhaol what significance it held. They sent their ships to Grainne's doorstep and began an attack on what would take the lives of her new family. Seeing the death in front of her, Grainne could no longer remain as the wife of a sailor, remembering a time where she cut off her own mane to get aboard a ship. She took command of the islands and the defenders, and over the course of 3 nights, she held off attacking equestrians. At first, it seemed as though the island would fall with their forces wary and outgunned, but a scheme from a fellow crewmate saw the pirates swimming to the equestrian ships at night and detonating gunpowder within them. When the smoke and fire had cleared, Grainne sailed her single remaining ship through the wreckage of the equestrian ships and on to her new life as a pirate captain. Over the course of many years, the pirates of Shireland were a thorn in the equestrian and Zebrations, with Grainne being the chief among those thorns. And while I was a male mare in Equestria hearing the stories of a badass pirate mare, and whilst it did suck that she was technically my enemy, she was also way too cool to not admire. She was once summoned to parley with Celestia and Luna themselves, and once she got there, she refused to speak a word of Equish to them. It was so awesome! Now, I won't give you all the details of her life and how she fought in the war because it's very long and involves a ton of battles and victories and defeats that we don't have time to get into. I'm only giving you the basics of her backstory because if you were a ghoul who is reading this, then you'll need to know what kind of mare she is. When the bombs fell, Grainne was not killed, instead joined the ranks of the undead, which is why I'm telling you about her in the first place, because her pirate ship is now a safe haven for ghouls. Grainne had been captured and taken to the equestrian mainland by the time the bombs had fell, so when she came back as a ghoul, she wasn't able to make her way to the sea. Instead, she roamed the mainland for just over 100 years. We even met a few times, which was super exciting because I hadn't met too many ghouls at the time, especially not glowing ghouls, so meeting a friendly face was really super cool, and then realizing that friendly face was also the face of some pony you idolized when you were younger, so it was even cooler, and then super cool, and then we got to hang out, and I just, stay focused, Ditz Horse, stay in the game. Alright, so once the first pockets of society had started to return to the wasteland, the world became far less safe for ghouls. Not every town greeted us with bullets, but it was definitely most of them for a good few years. Some of us made do by finding towns made up entirely of ghouls, but those would also get picked off by misguided wasteland survivors trying to find homes for normal ponies. Grainne didn't see a future for ghouls on land, and once she learned that the oceans were unlivable storms of irradiated water, she made a beeline. Gathering any ghouls she met along the way, she formed her own crew of pirate ghouls, and I'm an honorary member. So, ghouls, if you're looking for a home where the living can't get within shooting distance of you, then you should make your way to the Manhattan docks every full moon, because one of Grainne's ships will arrive looking for new ghouls who have heard the call. Which is why I've written this chapter, so that you know there is a place that is going to accept you, that's going to give you a home and a family and the coolest captain ever.